What's up, guys? So one of the things you always hear is that you need to trade with good habits, and not only trade with good habits, but identify your bad habits and get rid of them. So I've had some bad habits in my trading in the last, I would say, 3 months. There are always habits that I've had to work on from the beginning, but I wanted to know a little bit more in depth on how habits are created and what exactly are habits, what's going on in your head for something like that to create itself. So I spent a lot of time this weekend learning about the neuroscience of habits and how things work in your brain, and especially related to trading and how I could apply it for my own benefit. But that's what this video is about. So this video is going to be about habits, what they are, and more in depth of habits in general, but not only what habits are and the ins and outs of them, but how can we get rid of bad habits and eliminate bad habits from our trading in order to obviously trade better. So this behind me is the main thing that I found. Every habit has a cue, a routine, and a reward. So the cue is your trigger. For example, I'm going to use my bad habit for this whole video example. My bad habit is I will impulsively take a trade. I will impulsively enter a trade, and something cues that for me to do that. And also the reason why I do that is because subconsciously my brain wants the reward that it gets, that I have built up from doing that. So for example, I'm going to show you guys a chart that will probably make you understand this a lot better later, but this is essentially what a habit is. It's the habit loop. So you have a cue, you have a routine, which is the habit itself, and then you have the reward. So this is essentially why you subconsciously make the decision. Once again, I'm going to use my impulsive trading to get these points across to you guys. So there are more than one cue that lead to this. So for me personally, there's more than one thing that can cause me to impulsively put a trade on. These are not my exact cues. I will show you guys my cues, but just to give you guys an idea of what these cues are, it could just be as simple as seeing a red candle pop up, seeing, price move down on a red candle, and your brain, you might take a short, you might take a premature short because you see that. And you don't just do that because you're intuitively thinking. You're doing that because your brain wants the reward, and in this case, to feel in control on a red candle because you somewhat unsure and you are uncomfortable feeling unsure. So that's one thing. Also, you could tie that into FOMO. Like, for example, one of my big issues is if I'm watching price trade at one of my key levels and I might be a little too zoomed in, or I might just be a little too short-sighted. But if any volume comes in whatever direction I think we are going in, one of my bad habits called chasing, but I will put an entry on at a bad price, and then on top of it being a bad price, the idea in my head, there's not really too much logic behind it. What it is I am stressed out because I'm unsure of what's happening at my key level, and instead of waiting for something to clearly stick out to me, I will see something that validates whatever idea I'm thinking at the moment. It's a little too short-sighted, and then I get burnt on that. Another one of my bad habits is, say I take a trade like that, say I take a bad entry like that and I stop out. Let's say I stop out and then price starts going again in that way that I think it's going to go. I might re-enter the same trade again, and one, it's a bad trade. Two, I re-entered right after I took a loss. So in this case, the cue was I took a small loss, and the routine is to revenge trade. Essentially what this does is it restores my ego in the short term. So it makes me feel like I'm still in the position even though I already stopped out. These are just a few examples of cues, routines, and rewards for you guys. These aren't necessarily completely related to me. These are just the examples I have in front of me. But I'm going to explain to you guys, now that we know what a habit is a cue, a routine, and a reward. Now that we know that, how can we break a habit, and how can we fix this? How can we break a habit? Something that I did not know, once again, was that you can't just break and delete a habit. It's not how it works. You have a neural pathway in your brain that essentially makes you do these things that you do. And you can't just take away that neural pathway, but you can overwrite it. So the way you fix a bad habit is you do something called habit stacking. And what a habit stack is, so your routine is the habit. Instead of having the same routine, you have to swap the routine out. So for example, if I see a red candle and I think price is going to go down, instead of chasing it short, I have to replace the impulse entry of chasing it short with something else. You can't just delete it all, like, because you're going to have the cues no matter what. So you have to react. Essentially, you have to change your reaction to the thing that triggers the habit, and that will in turn lead to the same reward that you would have gotten if you would have done the bad habit. So this is called habit stacking. Once again, I had no idea that you couldn't break a bad habit. It makes a lot of sense to me, but it's something that you have to replace with something else. You can't just do that. So these are actually my habits and my cues. I'm going to shrink myself for a second, but this is my own personal chart that I made for myself. So we can take a few of these are my real habits. So we can use a few of my real habits here as an example for you guys. So the first one, let's say I'm unsure of price action at a key level that I'm watching. One of my bad habits is that I will overanalyze price at my key level whenever it's at the key level, instead of waiting for something that's very evident to me that allows me to build a thesis. For example, let's just say we're trading at a area of demand. I definitely have the issue of watching, like hyper fixating on what happens as soon as we start trading in demand. That is not a good way to trade, because essentially what it does is it causes me to stress out, and then I start getting unsure of the price action. I'm overanalyzing, and it basically just makes me a lot more susceptible to, let's say, a little small insignificant burst of volume comes in at the demand zone. I might chase it, and then immediately after that I get stopped out, and then obviously that can lead to another impulse. Like I just basically described, these are my main four. So it literally happens in order like this. I'm unsure, I take a bad trade, I feel in control, that's a reward. So I have to replace, instead of impulse clicking the buy button, I have to do something else. I have to replace it with something else. So in this case, I have to wait for a reaction off of my level before an entry. So instead of trading at my level, I'm gonna wait for what happens after my level is traded. This way, it'll give me a higher probability chance to develop a intelligent thesis, not something that's impulsively driven. Let's say a burst of volume comes in and it gives me that impulse where I want to put the trade on, like a bad habit that I have. Instead of clicking the buy button, I just have to think to myself, I would rather miss out on this right now than take a bad entry. And that's going to essentially it's essentially going to work the same way as if I would have taken the trade. It's going to do the same thing for me. I'm going to get the same reward. Take it a step further. Let's say I take a loss. Instead of re-entering immediately, which is another problem that I have, I just have to either wait 2 minutes no matter what, or I can wait until I see a new form of confirmation, which that's the only way I would ever overturn the 2-minute rule that I'm gonna have. In this case, yeah, I might have taken a small loss, but this prevents me from doing the same thing that I normally would have done, which has been impulsively put the trade on once again. And then the last one I got is not really a huge issue that I suffer, but it definitely has happened a handful of times in my trading journey, where I might have an idea of what price is gonna do, and then we might have news or data come out, and we get a nice whipsaw. Let's just say, for example, I have a bullish bias for whatever reason. As soon as that news reaction hits, sometimes I might once again get the fear of missing out and just place a trade where I think the dust settled at. And that's obviously a terrible trade to take, and it has caused me to lose a few times. So once again, this isn't like the biggest habit that I have, but this is something that I can work on when it happens. So instead of taking the trade, once again, I repeat this I just literally, all I have to do is think to myself, I would rather miss out on this than take a bad entry. So these are my exact habits and what I'm replacing the routine with. And this is essentially how I plan on erasing my bad habits, or not erasing, but overwriting my bad habits and still getting the reward that my brain subconsciously wants. There are a few things you can do that you can replace your routine with. For example, these are mine. These are what I'm replacing them with. But one that I saw that I really liked was, instead of impulsively making a trade or putting something on, all you got to do is take, if you guys have heard of box breathing, it's where you inhale 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, repeat it. And that's gonna lead me to the next thing that I think that a lot of you will find very interesting, and what I believe is essentially the root cause of impulsiveness in general, at least for myself. So another thing that's very interesting that I had no idea about is that I've heard about this stuff when I was in like high school in science class, like biology or whatever. We got this part in our brain called the prefrontal cortex. It essentially handles all of our rationale. It allows us to think logically. We also have a part in our brain called the amygdala, and this is it's kind of like our fight or flight operating system, if you want to call it that. It's known for being responsible for fear and reactivity. If you get put into a survival mode situation, this is the part of your brain that's activated. And one thing that I did not know and that I found super interesting was that whenever you stress yourself out, which I often find in my impulsive entries, I am stressed out. I am stressing myself in the moment. Your prefrontal cortex literally turns off, like it completely shuts down. So what does that mean? That means you are literally not thinking logically at all. Your brain is physically not capable of using logic anymore, because when you're stressed out, you go into fight or flight, and your emotions essentially drive all of your decision making, which are in turn very impulsive. So this, paired with the bad habits, this essentially kind of is what creates the bad habits in the first place. But this stuff is never going to go away. Obviously, you're never not going to experience stress at some point. So as long as you know that you're stressed out, that can prevent you from doing anything stupid, really. Now that you know when you're stressed out, it leads to impulsive decisions, and it literally completely disables your ability to think logically. How can you turn your prefrontal cortex back on so that you can think logically? Here are a few ways you can do it. Like I said, my favorite one I think that I've found is the box breathing. The box breathing is one way. You can physically get up and take a lap around your house, or you can just basically label the emotion and register with yourself that you are stressed out. These things can turn your prefrontal cortex on in a minute. One thing that I took away from all this stuff that I learned is that it doesn't take very long for your prefrontal cortex to regain control and for you to be able to think logically again. And that's why I like the box breathing so much, because you can do a few rounds of that. It's like 30, 40 seconds, and you're back to using your brain. But the main takeaway from all of this, or the main takeaway that you should have from the second part of this presentation, is that when you are stressed out, your logic center of your brain is literally not online. Like it is not active. It is not working. You are in fight or flight mode, and you are going to act out impulsively is completely out of your hands unless you get your prefrontal cortex back online. So these are just some things that I didn't know. I know that was I would say that was a pretty information-packed presentation for you guys, but you guys know that I'm on a 90-day journey right now. You guys know that I'm transforming myself into my best over the next 90 days. And one thing that completely is in the way of me being my best is these impulsive entries. So I wanted to get to the bottom of those. And what I found was truly mind-blowing. If you guys follow me on Twitter, I was talking a little bit about it this weekend. If you follow my TikTok, you've definitely seen me post videos about all this stuff. But I had to bring it to YouTube because it's definitely worth sharing to everyone. I know that my biggest issue in trading, it always has been, is the impulsive entries where if something's not clear enough to me, I will literally get stressed out, and I know when I get stressed out, and even if I'm stressed for only a few seconds, if I get to that point where my prefrontal cortex shuts down, that's when I'm taking bad trades. So like, all you have to do is really regain control of that and just try to look at the situation for exactly what it is. And it's not something that's going to be extremely easy to fix, but just knowing everything that I've just showed you guys in this video, how your habits form, which is pretty much, in my opinion, in trading, a lot of your habits form due to stress, and then you reinforce those habits over time by not knowing what's happening in your brain. So if you guys like that video, give my channel a subscribe, give the video a like. This one is definitely going to be crucial in my own trading, so I thought I'd share it. But if you guys want more, let me know. But anyway, I'll catch you guys in the next one.